The reason we need more voices in the climate and ecological crisis work, because it is work, there are people in rooms making decisions about how to solve this problem that seemingly feels too much. And the voices that are least heard are black and people of colour and women in those spaces. It is dominated by white men in the majority. And the ideas that we have to solve a problem, when someone says, we've got a problem, how do we solve it? The ideas that you come up with are only as a result of the things that have happened to you in your life or the things that you've been taught. So if you've got a room full of people with exactly the same background, coming up with a solution to one of the greatest problems that has ever hit humanity, they're probably going to be going around in circles and suggesting potentially the same solutions. And when they're also the people that live the lifestyle that has created the problem in the first place, that ability to self-reflect and go and to come up with really imaginative solutions and be vulnerable and to look inwardly and think about what they need to do to change, it's just not going to get us to that place. I'm Nadia Shaikh. I'm from the northeast and live up in Scotland. I work for the RSPB as a policy officer in land policy, also work in land justice, and was one of the organisers for Kinder in Colour, which is an event for black and people of colour to celebrate our existence in nature and right to be in nature and outdoors. So Kinder in Colour was an event which is snowballing into more of a bit of a movement, which was around an important anniversary in kind of British culture, heritage, history of people's right and fight to belong in a countryside where general public have been excluded from the wilder landscape. In its 90th anniversary, we wanted to write black and people of colour in the history books to say that although we do now have more access to the countryside, black and people of colour still have less access to the countryside. And so we wanted to mark the anniversary with gathering as many black and people of colour who felt like they belong in one place, which is what we did, which is beautiful.
My name is Jini Reddy. I'm a writer, I am a journalist, I'm the author of 2 books. 2 years ago I wrote a book called Wonderland about my search for magic in landscapes across Britain. By magic I mean exploring in ways that are playful, intuitive, imaginative and spiritually deepening. As a travel writer I ventured quite widely, and occasionally I had opportunities to meet people from indigenous cultures, and I was always struck by the way among those I met it seemed perfectly natural to enter into this beautiful two-way relationship with the forces of nature, not just physical nature but the unseen forces of nature, the spirit of nature if you like. And I found this fascinating and inspiring, and I wanted to know if I might be able to experience a glimpse of the world in this way. I was also having adventures of my own. I remember wild camping and fasting in the Pyrenean Mountains for 5 nights. And I did the same in the Sinai Desert in Egypt, sleeping under the stars without a tent, even without a sleeping bag. And in both of these experiences, I found myself deepening spiritually, and they took my connection to nature to a whole different level. I think it's really important to bring the spiritual into travel and nature writing because it's about decolonizing narratives. It's about acknowledging that there are ways of being and knowing and perceiving that have long been excluded from mainstream Western knowledge bases and dismissed, but this doesn't make them any less valid or meaningful.
I am Miranda Lowe and I'm based in South London, and I work at the Natural History Museum as a principal curator and museum scientist. Most people might think about being a curator in terms of art, but in the museum that I work at, I look after animal specimens, so marine invertebrates, so they're sea creatures without backbones. My Black History Tour is not just leading people round the exhibitions and looking at specimens, it's more like a conversation with those on the tour that people can ask me any kind of question. So I feel empowered to kind of give them the truth, the real answers, and sometimes to say, I don't actually know that. But I could signpost you to somebody that does, or inspire somebody to investigate a particular side, a curiosity story much further. In many cases, for the first time, people coming on my tour have never met a scientist, and on many levels, never met a black female scientist, natural history curator. First time to ask what they've always wanted to know about the colonial side of the collections, or even the scientific side of them. And for the very first time, me doing a tour like that, I bring my whole self as well. I bring my professional self, my cultural insight, and also me as a black woman.
All the Elements is a non-profit network for those creating change on diversity in the UK outdoors, and it was founded in August 2020. Our members include community group leaders, individual activists, but also representatives from AOMBs and national parks, large sector organisations as well, and even some national governing bodies. So it's really, really quite broad, and even more than that, but that's a good start. What was really important to me when setting up All the Elements is that it was very intersectional. I wanted it to represent all different diversity areas, whether that's invisible and visible disabilities, sexuality and gender identity, race and ethnicity, different body types in the outdoors, age, because I realised that people were also working in silos, and the members of all these communities are intersectional. They're not just one thing. So actually being able to work with or meet people who are running a group that is working on a completely different diversity area to you helps you better serve your community as a whole. The work in this area is hard. Like, we don't do it because we like hard work. We do it because we love the outdoors and we love nature and we love our communities. And so being able to talk to other people who are going through similar things and experiencing similar things and have overcome them themselves is really powerful.
My name is Chantelle Lindsay. I was born in Doncaster in South Yorkshire, but I've lived in South London for most of my life now. And I work as the Great Northwood Project Officer at London Wildlife Trust, and I'm also a CBeebies presenter on Chantelle and Rory's Teeny Tiny Creatures. I feel like I've always had a purpose to make this world a better place somehow, even in a very small way, and to impact people around me and to inspire and empower. So CBeebies has kind of given me that platform to be what I didn't see when I was younger, and that's a black woman, naturalist, just someone who loves wildlife, and someone there that is in that kind of wildlife sphere, I suppose, because when I was younger I watched a lot of documentaries, watched a lot of programs, and I had, you know, those people like Angelica from Blue Peter. You'd have like maybe like one or two people that you looked up to. So I think, yeah, it's nice to be that representation. In the wildlife sector, there's this narrative that I often heard was that, you know, black people aren't interested, people of colour aren't interested in wildlife, you know, they're hard to reach audiences. I've heard that quite a lot. And it's kind of like flipping that on the head and being like, actually, no, we are. I'm a living testament of that. But you just have to, go to people. You have to find what ignites them. You have to find their draw. You have to find our connection, our unique connection with nature, because it doesn't all look the same.
You can come to Black Girls Hike on a weekend. Someone said it was like coming home from shopping and putting your bags down, because it's a load off. And people understand you, so you can relate to people, and you're able to kind of, I don't think people realise the importance of human connection, but sometimes when you're in environments where you don't actually connect with people for a long time, that can be really detrimental for your mental health. And I think people don't realise that they aren't actually connecting on the level that they need to. It's only when you're around people that are like-minded that you realise that this is the soul food that I've been starving. I get loads of people reach out to me and tell me that Black Girls Hike has absolutely changed their lives. And I'm just like, how? In what way? And then they'll go on to describe it. And sometimes it's really emotional, and I just can't believe that that's from something that, just a little idea that I had. But you get people who are talking about creating new generational pastimes for the families. It has been really beneficial, in fact, in the way it's transformed people's mental health, but also their aspirations as well. So we've had people come to our group and they've never been on a hike before, and then a couple months later we had someone recently, she posted a video of her doing a skydive. So it's just the kind of people are like building more confidence, and it's empowering them to go and do other stuff. It's empowering them to travel by themselves. People are living the best lives and they're telling me all about it, and I absolutely love it.
Hi, I'm Dr Jade Adams-White. I'm based in Liverpool. I'm a mental health practitioner, and I also have a doctorate in psychology. I set up the Jadeite project to help people reconnect with nature, reconnect with themselves, learn the benefits of nature to their mental health and well-being, and also set up a gardening club called the Feel Good Gardening Club. The Feel Good Gardening Club came about during the pandemic, so working in a secondary school as a mental health practitioner, and speaking to a lot of young people that were struggling with their mental health, not really having the support available to them, dealing with long waiting times to get support. So having young people come out once a week, do their gardening, and a lot of them, it makes them feel relaxed. It helps them be more sociable. They enjoy it, it's fun. It really allows the young people to be present, and that's where they get the most benefits out. They're not kind of thinking about any future stress, they're not worried about any passings, they're just being completely present in the moment. And it was just pure joy. I think sometimes young people lose that sense of playfulness, that kind of joyful element to them, because we live in a society where there's a lot going on, there's a lot of negativity around the world, and children are consuming that. So actually to provide that space for them to be children, to play, taking it back to basics, is, as I said, the simplicity of gardening is, I think, what works for them. I'm a big person in metaphors and what we learn. So if we're doing weeding, I try and get them to attach a negative thought to that weed. So as they're pulling it out, they're physically removing that mental kind of thought from their mind, from the ground. Another thing we do is writing our worries on like a leaf and just letting that go. So we can really use nature as a metaphor to learn from. A lot of them report feeling lonely. Gardening allows a connection to something wider, something bigger. I think when we talk about nature, it is that connection to something bigger than what we are.
Formatively, so as becoming an adult from a child, the constant has been, I love nature. Probably the only constant I've got is nature makes sense to me. Being in it makes sense. It doesn't ask you any questions, I guess. It's just there and it's solid, and it just like story tells all the time. It gives you a metaphor. So if it lifts you when the sun shines, and it makes you feel wild when the wind blows, and you can be all of these things, and it's just safe. It's gorgeous. It's colourful. It's funny. It's weird. It smells. It's like hairy. It flies. It's everything. I just can't explain it. Yeah, I love it.
When I was younger, I never felt to myself, oh, I could be running like an outdoor organisation, because I didn't have any exposure to the outdoors. It just wasn't something that was on my radar. My early childhood, my experiences of nature were just basically going to the local park. Me and my brother used to collect frogs, there might have been toads, from the local canal. I remember I used to make these houses in my back garden out of like a mop bucket, and I'd put it on its side and try and get hedgehogs to come. I'd put like slugs in there. Me and one of my friends used to collect these the black and yellow caterpillars. We'd always collect them in a jar. So I was always outside doing that kind of stuff, but we never really went into like exploring the countryside. I spent a lot of my childhood living in Lancashire, which is right on the West Pennines, but then Lancashire is just not a very diverse place. So you'd be in the town, but you wouldn't ever think to like go into the countryside. And when we was younger, we would go on these car picnics My granddad was from Jamaica and he had loads of friends in Nottingham. So him, my family, my mum and her brothers and sisters, they'd like do the drive from Manchester to Nottingham, like the scenic route, my mum always calls it, but they never get out the car. So they used to have these like car picnics. And then when we was growing up, we used to have them as well. So like my mum liked driving in the countryside, but we'd just sit in the car. And I'm just assuming now that she probably just didn't think it was safe. And that's probably been passed down from the fact that my granddad used to take them in the car and these car picnics. And I suppose from my mum, looking at like somebody that's, you know, your father figure, someone that's supposed to be like this strong person and they aren't comfortable to take you into those spaces, then obviously you're going to think that that's not safe. And I think it's justified for you to think that that's not safe. If you think about the kind of hostility that our grandparents, etc., were facing when they first came over in those generations into the city, what would make you think you should go into the countryside? It's not going to be any more safer because it's even more white there, isn't it? More dangerous. I can see how they would make that correlation.
I'd been in a primary school where I was like kind of the only black girl in my year group. And although that has its kind of ways of developing you, it can be quite lonely and isolating. So yeah, being in a multicultural university kind of shaped that for me, although my course wasn't very diverse. And learning now that the environmental sector is the second least diverse sector in the UK, second to agriculture. So now that I know that, it's all kind of makes sense. But I think at that time I was just starting to notice like how deep it went in terms of being a minority in this space. And then becoming more kind of involved in the sector was when I felt like I had to become empowered to do something about the lack of diversity. I mean, I love that I can be the representation, but I almost felt like I needed to fling the doors wide open for people to come after me, the black girls to come after me, people of colour to come after me. What I love about my project is that it has an emphasis on bringing underrepresented groups into wildlife. With the youth groups, we bring them out into the woodlands, and a lot of people haven't been into the woods before, so the project focuses on South London woodlands called the Great North Wood. So young people might come out in like decked out in their tracksuits to begin with, like their finest trainers, and you're kind of like, right, we're going to have to change this around. But we're constantly trying to bring down the barrier, so we'll supply shoes that they can change into, maybe waterproof things. And at first, some of the young people are kind of a bit disengaged because it's a completely new experience for them. As soon as you kind of find that spark and, you know, we're doing practical conservation, we're doing something that matters, you're explaining to them why we're doing it, and all of a sudden they're absolutely stuck in. So we had the first session, they came and they asked us questions, and the young people were kind of going, why do you do this? Like, I didn't know you could do a career in this. And then the second time that they came, they were working on a hedgerow trying to basically like take out any invasive species. And it started to rain, and we kind of all ran for cover, and I turned around and the young people were just still working, going at it because they were so into it. So it's just, if you just find that spark in young people, then yeah, there's absolute magic in that.
I had never felt othered until I was in about my mid-20s, and I was at an adventure event, and someone approached me from a very high-profile organisation and said to me that they wanted to know how to get more people like me at their events. And that hit me quite hard because I hadn't realised that people were looking at me in a different way, that they were viewing me as somebody who was different within that space. That experience made me realise that there was something else important going on, that I knew I belonged there, and if there weren't more people who were like me, then maybe I needed to be able to give a better answer, and maybe there was something there that I needed to do, even if it was in a small way. Although I was always talking about role modelling, I wasn't doing it myself. I would post these lovely outdoors pictures all over my Instagram. I would write these posts with very opinionated posts and articles, but I was not really showing my face as a woman of colour working in these spaces. And you can't tell other people to do something if you're not doing it yourself. So I started doing that. And that's hard, really hard and lonely. I wanted to speak to other people who were going through similar things. And I knew they were out there because I'd seen them on social media doing amazing things, but just like hints of them here and there. So I thought there must be a network for that, right? People out there trying to create change on diversity in the outdoor sector specifically. And I found a handful of activists and I reached out to them. And some of them came back to me and said, no, that doesn't exist. It would be great though, if it did exist. And I started getting these alarm bells of, oh no, I feel like I've started something that needs to happen.
So one of the other reasons behind me starting Black Girls Hike a few years ago was because I had a car accident and I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is also known as PTSD. And I basically started developing anxiety. So they called it a near-death experience because I was stood at a traffic island and two cars was racing and they smashed into the traffic island. And the guy ended up like getting banned from driving, and it's on the internet. It's called Pedestrian Cheats Death. So it was in all the big papers and stuff. And I think at the time, it was just so surreal to me. I never really took in what happened. It was obviously a massive shock, but only after seeing the video and my doctor telling me, you look like you would have died in that video, and other people saying that they thought I would have died in that video, it just kind of really hit home. And it just kind of started thinking about, I thought about mortality, but then I also started thinking about where I was in life, and it started making me feel really anxious about how I was spending my time, because really, someone nearly just took me out of the game. So there was one time that I was coming back on the train through the Peak District, and I was just kind of like watching people get on and off, and I was like, do you know what? I'm actually gonna go and explore this. And I remember taking this little video and filming and saying, and taking up hiking this year and just tagged it BGH. But it also now, it reminds me of the fact that I also love the scenic route, but I just never felt like I'm gonna go and explore it. So it was a big step for me. And I called it Black Girls Hike because it was about challenging the stereotypes within our community. Because when I say Black Girls Hike, most black people would go, what? Black Girls Hike? And I'm like, yes, we do everything.
I started to notice that the system that working in nature conservation can be problematic. I was kind of zooming out and understanding that it's also part of the system, which was kind of heartbreaking because it was a deep relationship for me. So it's been a series of learning, heartbreak, and having to keep refinding your place into like, what am I bringing to this, I guess, sector? What am I bringing to the nature conservation sector? And how am I helping save nature inside that system and helping them realise? I started to understand that the same reason why black and people of colour are not represented in the countryside like white people are, the same reason why the UK is one of the most biodiversity depleted countries in the world, the same reason in the organisation I work and I look around and it's only white people, I start to recognise that's all the same problem. It's all the same problem. And then I felt a power, I suppose, in understanding, okay, there's something we can do here. I think, so Audre Lorde put it best, you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. I recognised that the way that we're trying to save nature is by using the same tools, doing the same kind of activities that are destroying it in the first place. So treating land like it is something to take and something to consume. Nature conservation often is about taking land and protecting it from people, rather than recognising that people need to be in nature as much as possible. Only then will we ever truly be able to save it, which is a difficult conversation to have when we have a really well-established way of saving nature in the Western world, and particularly the UK. I guess 50% of land in England is owned by less than 1% of people. We have one of the biggest, in terms of across the globe, concentrated land wealth and ownership in the world. And when you look deeper where that is, that land ownership, the wealth that comes from the land today and the wealth that bought that land in the first place came from slavery. It came from colonisation of the globe. So not only do black and people of colour not have access to land as like white people, and also white people don't have access to land like they should as well. There are all these existing barriers. There's this existing pain of why you might walk up to a field and it says danger, keep out, or no access, keep out, you don't belong here. There's a strong you don't belong here for black and people of colour. It comes strongly down to land justice. We have access to less than 8% of land in England to wander freely. If they don't have access to land, then they can't have a sense of ownership or agency to protect it. And if they don't have agency to protect it, how are we ever going to win this battle? It can't be one organisation winning the battle on behalf of 70 million people.
The risk of not telling the stories that I have been telling, or not continuing to tell those, makes people feel that they're undervalued, that they've nothing to contribute, and that they didn't in terms of their history or their ancestry, that they didn't contribute to science. And then it's only one narrative, a Western narrative, that has been told, and that it's only European naturalists that have discovered anything, when there was discovery before any naturalists turned up on these islands. So in 2017 there was an ideal opportunity to express my thoughts and thinking around recognising the contribution of black and indigenous people in terms of collecting specimens in the world of natural history and their contribution to science. So I collaborated with Sabadra Das from UCL Museums, who also was thinking about the subject of scientific racism. So we intertwined those two lots of ideas and presented them at a natural history conference held in Cambridge. We were presenting to our peers. There was only one other black person in the audience. I was very aware of that. It was, well, we were both absolutely petrified at that point in time. And you could have heard a pin drop while we were presenting. And I just remember thinking at that time that no one's liking this. This is a disaster. But actually, when we finished, there was a round of applause. Everybody was talking about it. The Twitter feed that we had running alongside the conference went wild. There were tweets, where did you get all this information from? I remember I even had an inquiry from a BBC researcher about one of the stories that I told. And so all the fears that were within, and for so many decades, that actually people had just never really thought about it. Or just as we went into a pandemic in 2020, the paper became free access. Black Lives Matter re-emerged because of George Floyd's murder. And people began to find our work. And then it was going outside of the museum sphere as well. I was told one day in June in 2020, the paper was downloaded 6,000 times. It has opened up, in terms of museum directors, the conversation around racism, diversity, inclusion and representation.
When we think of activists and when we think of change makers, we often think of people who are like standing in the limelight, on stage, making big speeches. And what I've learned through this process is that doesn't necessarily feel authentic to me. And there are different ways to be a change maker and an activist. And that's exciting.
As a child, I was a selective mute, so I didn't have that power, I didn't have a voice. So for me, working with young people and providing them with a voice, providing them with an outlet has been really powerful.
As I've gotten older, I kind of want to be seen for my authentic self. So when now being on television on such a big sort of platform, I feel like it's a need to be my authentic self so that I'm being real, basically, and so that people can relate to me and so that I can recognise the person on the screen behind the presenter persona. And in terms of, representation and how that kind of trickles through to the environmental sector, is that there are a lot of people who aren't being seen, a lot of black people, a lot of people of colour aren't being seen and aren't seeing themselves in the sector as well. So for me, being visible is about being that representation that I didn't see. But it also carries a lot of pressure, I think, in that way, because you want to, I've got all the good intentions to want to inspire and empower and kind of be this like force for good. I say I want to be a force for good and a source of love. But I feel like in order to kind of do that, you have to do a lot of kind of working on yourself, which is what I'm constantly trying to do, so that I can then kind of be this, I don't know, to be this person that other people see and they're like, actually, I can do that.
I worked as a sports coach for a while, and we'd go into different schools and do different activities with the young people, increasing their physical literacy and getting them kind of moving around. And I remember being in a school and there was this one girl that came running up to me and she said, "You've got skin just like me." And for me, that was powerful. It took me a moment and it really kind of took me by surprise in a way, because I hadn't realised the power that I had in that setting. It's kind of opening that space for others to see you in that space and being proud of what you're doing. I think sometimes we have the tendency of not wanting to be visible. As said, as a young child, I didn't want to be visible. I didn't want to own the space, but it's knowing that I have the right to own that space. I have the right to be there.
I was very shy. If you ask people about it, I was very shy, but studious and very fascinated about the natural world, plants and animals. But I would just get on and do my thing. I'm not a very, I wouldn't say very kind of like showy person. It's not been easy working in a white male dominated space. For many, many reasons, but within science it's very hierarchical, white male dominated. It took me a long time to have the confidence to even speak at a conference, to actually in the beginning to even apply to get funding to go internally to go to a conference, yet alone speak. So there was a lot in the beginning. I would just like get my head down, just do my work, just to kind of survive in this environment. I really love what I do, just do that. But then, becoming more empowered and doing this, I think that doing the research in, acknowledging the contribution of people of colour in the world of natural history kind of empowered me a little bit more, because I was finding out, because science is evidence-based, right? So I had to find all this evidence to prove my thinking and this is worth doing and that people should know about and care and value. These people, the names, the stories, were kind of like external forces from within the museum, encouraging me, empowering me.
One challenge I faced in writing Wonderland was my fear around how the book would be received. I wasn't a biologist, I wasn't a naturalist, I wasn't an ecologist. I was a writer, I wasn't an expert, and I was writing about nature in a spiritual way. In the writing of Wonderland, though, I found myself letting go of my awkwardness, my feelings of being or feeling different. I was interested in what was hidden, and I began to see parallels with my own feelings of being in an in-between space, in that I was born in Britain, I was raised in Canada, I now lived in England. My mum and dad were Indian from South Africa, so I didn't feel that I fitted into any boxes, and I sometimes felt on the periphery of things. I came to see that this space, this in-between space that I occupy, is a dynamic space, an enriching space, and a strength and not a weakness.
I don't consider myself to be the same person I was before founding Black Girls Hike. I feel like I'm growing every day. I'm growing and evolving as a person, and I'm quite liking the person that I'm becoming. But it has been challenging because founding Black Girls Hike and having to navigate so much stuff that I don't know, it does throw up loads of different flaws in your character, exactly, that you obviously have to build on. You have to kind of always be on a journey of self-improvement when you're the founder of an organisation like this.
Throughout the traineeship, 3-month traineeship, I shadowed the project that I currently work on. So I shadowed the Great North Wood project. So I worked a lot with the volunteers that were there, and they saw me as a trainee. So then when it was coming towards the end of the project, and I was moving from a trainee into the Great Northwood Project Officer role, so I was now leading the volunteers, for me it was like straight away imposter syndrome. I remember one time we were building steps, which was quite like a really like vigorous activity, and there were a lot of men weighing in, and I was kind of like trying to, it was one of the first days that I was trying to lead, and I was trying to like be really like strict and, you know, authoritative, but I literally had to go around the corner and have a little cry because I was like, you know what, there's too many people questioning me. And then I kind of realised, actually, I'm questioning myself. I had to learn how to, I guess, trust myself first and believe in myself first, and then that comes across to other people. I had to leave behind, and I'm still every day trying to leave behind that kind of lack of self-belief, which I think, especially if you are a black person or a person of colour in a white dominated space, that comes across really strongly, and you know, all of a sudden the first thing you feel is that you don't belong. So it's constantly, I've learned, trying to overcome that, and it's a daily thing.
While it has been hugely positive and I'm grateful for all the opportunities I've had, I think one of the challenges I have faced is when I am invited to speak at an event and I realize I'm the only person of color who has been invited, and I am asked to speak about inclusion, which is not my specialist subject, and everyone else is invited to speak about what they love and feel passionate about. And I feel that I too deserve to speak about what I love and feel passionate about. As I become more visible as an author, as a speaker, I have found it incredibly empowering. I think it's about time. I say bring it on.
Being someone that's kind of advocating for representation as a woman of colour and obviously becoming increasingly visible, it's interesting because I run a safe space for black women, but when I'm advocating for black women, I'm not entering safe spaces. So I'm basically going into spaces where I'm experiencing microaggressions, insidious racism, working with organisations that really don't want to do the kind of like structural, cultural change that they actually need. There's a lot of tokenism, there's a lot of lip service. I actually said the other day in one of my talks that I feel like there's not that much accountability. I found it really frustrating where you have people that have been in these positions for 20, 30 years. They're obviously failing with the organisational goals because they're not engaging the communities that they're supposed to be. A black person could never be in a job for 20, 30 years and not be doing the right job, could they? They would never get away with that. And that's one of the things that really I find really frustrating, because you go there and you'll be telling them really basic things like, do you not think you should be changing your recruitment practices because you have all the same people coming in? And they act like they're really, really radical ideas. And that's what I find really frustrating, because you just realise where the people's mindset is at that you are trying to help.
If you want to get into conservation and be part of the people who are responsible for helping nature, I would say there's an amazing now growing network of black and people of colour led groups in the outdoors. And I would say meet people in nature, claim that space, go on a walk, look for wildflowers, look for birds, just have a walk in a forest. Talk to each other about what does it mean to have a sense of belonging through nature. Remember as your foundation that you belong and you exist and this is yours. In a world and in a country which there are millions of messages telling you you don't belong, and that's fences and it's signs and it's routes into conservation which are hard to get into. Remember that you absolutely belong, and it is your fight because it's your nature. And just follow the things that always feel good. but it's not an easy sector to get into, and don't be disheartened. It's just not. So, yeah, it's not great advice, but it's it is hard to find a place. It is hard to belong in a place that doesn't want you to belong in it. For you, as opposed to a tokenistic representation, it is hard to genuinely belong and be heard. I'm still not heard. I'm still silenced. I still burn bridges all the time at work by speaking out. I did one yesterday. I spoke up and I could see them going, I wish you wouldn't be so difficult. And so it's not you. It's not you. It's the system. So look after yourself, but keep doing it.
I think it's important that with anything that you're doing, the intention behind that is pure. The intention behind the people that you're working with, they're coming from the right place. And again, it's knowing your worth. So you can say no to something if you don't want to do it, if you don't think it's going to be the right thing for you. Say no. It's not a reflection on you. It's kind of having that awareness of who you are and the power that you have within.
I think if you're a young person watching this and you are facing those challenges, I think you need to mobilise yourself, create a community, find some like-minded people, because you are powerful, and we're powerful as individuals, but we're more powerful as a collective. So find your tribe.
Realise that you are not alone. That is the really important thing, that you're not alone in some of these issues. You're not alone. That's it, because you can get overwhelmed by certain situations, and it's like someone coming in and just sort of plucking you out of that situation where everything's enclosing on you, taking you out, rescuing you, putting you back down in safety, and then you can breathe again.
If I was talking to my younger self, I would tell her not to worry about feeling awkward or insecure or different, and that one day her difference would be a gift. I would tell her to follow whatever sparks her curiosity, and again, to not be afraid of it being unusual or weird, because this is a source of inspiration and creativity and a meaningful life.
I would tell her thank you, first of all, for just being, getting emotional now, for just being so strong, and for kind of knowing so early on that I had a purpose and following that. Because I think at that age I was very, there was a lot of like loving life, but there was a lot of like hard times during that time as well. So I think for me nature was that kind of solace, the peace. And so I think kind of following that and allowing myself to follow that is what to thank my younger self for. And also to tell her that you're going to get to places that you never even dreamed of, and just to keep going. And I think I'm really thankful that I did keep going through all the kind of barriers that were put up, as hard as it is, and you know, and all the help that I got. I'm really, really grateful from her in terms of just constantly trying, I think, just constantly trying to make myself better, trying to make the world better, and clinging on to nature. I think there's a time when, like, you know, we can get distracted as young people and we just kind of like forget about nature and we're, you know, into our PlayStations, things like that. But I'm just really glad that she stuck to nature, because that's what brings me peace. And that's what grounds me, and I don't know where I would be or who I would be if I didn't have this love for nature. So I would say thank you and to keep going.
It can be hard, it can be difficult, you can have barriers, but actually, again, it's standing up for what you believe in, standing up for your passion, and being able to be that face or that person for the next generation. With a lot of the stuff we do it's not for us per se, but it's for the younger generations, so that they come in, they step into their power and they do it better.
Often you think activism and change is like shouting and campaigns and marching in the streets, which it absolutely is. But for any great movement that you'll ever be a part of, there's three important elements, which is demanding the change that you want to see and saying, I want this change. it's denying the systems of oppression. So it's rejecting them and trying to bring them down and calling out and saying, here's why it's wrong. Here's why land justice is an issue. The third and most important thing is healing. Every great movement of every past has involved all those three elements, and healing is often forgotten.
When I started this project, I would have never thought that I would get so much from it personally, because it was so much about amplification and helping people work together. But actually, I've gained this amazing community full of some of the most wonderful and inspiring people that I've ever met. And I'm so grateful for that. I feel like the colour of transformation is an earthy orange. It feels like a colour that brings joy. I can't even really explain why, but it's something that you see in nature across the world, and it reminds me of sunlight, and it reminds me of spring and autumn. It's change. So yeah, I think it's like an earthy orange.
I think the colour of transformation for me is a series of learnings and noticings and almost like awakening moments of going, these things have happened to me that have taken me to this place, and I can't go back to that place now because I'm awake and I know. And it's recognizing that it can be really painful to change and let go of a bit of you, but it's way more colourful in so many different ways in terms of the people you meet, the things you do, the stories that you hear, the way that you absorb the world. So I might have previously been out and enjoying nature and feeling, oh God, I don't belong. Now I feel like I'm out in nature and I'm like, I belong. And it feels more powerful. But now I recognise how now I've learnt more about land justice issues. I'm like, oh, the problem's harder than I ever thought it was back then. When I was younger and just wanted to save polar bears. Now I'm like, it's more than polar bears. It's massive systems change. But it's powerful and it's stronger. And I recognise that there will be more moments for me where I will say goodbye to me now and I will be another me. So I think it replicates the pain that exists in the natural world, which is life and death constantly. But it's a beautiful thing, and it's just keep moving.
Well, it's me. That's why you're interviewing me. It's me. I'm part of that colour of transformation. It's me and other people's stories. Yeah, so I'm one of the building blocks that others will build on. So yeah, I see myself as part of that transformation. Definitely.